I'm going to talk to you about literally making orthotics here in our office. Now, normally speaking, we take a mold of someone's foot for various different foot problems, mechanical disorders of the feet, and we send this mold out to a laboratory. Today it's evolved from even making a mold like this to using three-dimensional scanning to achieve the same thing. But sometimes it's as if we need a foot in our hands while we're making the device. And the only way to do that is to do it myself. Years ago, my father practiced podiatry for 40 years, made all his own orthotics in a small room in the basement of our home. And patients loved the results. Well, we've evolved and we use these laboratories. But in cases where our patients get older, they can't tolerate some of the rigid materials that the laboratories use. And I've returned to occasionally combining various materials in order to support the foot and, in this case, take the load off one spot that keeps building up a very, very painful callus formation. So the mold of the foot was taken, it was marked, and from there we go to a choice of materials. There are multitudinous materials to make orthotics out of. But one of my favorites that I just brought back is something that we call Birkenkork. Yeah, it sounds like Birkenstock, like the sandal. And it's a mixture of cork and nylon. It molds at an extremely low temperature. It gets almost like silly putty. So it's very easy to mold to a foot model and have it accommodate or form a depression here to take pressure off this sore spot. It'll then be combined with other materials. This thin leopard blue layer is actually similar to the material that's in the midsole of your shoes called EVA. And then there are other shock absorbing materials with closed cell foams that don't deform. This is blue and it's called Poron, P-O-R-O-N, that'll be used up in the front of the device to further cushion this foot. And finally cover it with a material that is a neoprene insole with a top nylon cover. Lots of other alternatives exist. We'll be back with you shortly. We show you some of the process in the middle where things have been molded. What I'll do is heat this up and then take it out so you can see, right now it's hard, but when it gets molded, heat molded, it really gets squishy. And it molds at a fairly low temperature. Well, I gotta turn this dial up. So the first step in working with this cast is normally this would have been filled with plaster of Paris or through the three-dimensional scanning of 𝗙𝗢𝗢𝗢𝗧 tooled at the laboratory. Here I've created my own process to make the inside of this solid and with the use of sandbags, believe it or not, so that we have something to press on. The laboratories used vacuum presses. Years and years ago, when my father first started this, we found flexible material. At the time, it was from a women's girdle. Now we have lycra fabric stretched across this so that we have something to press the warm materials when they come out of the oven down upon this layer. I use an interface because we don't want to melt the fiberglass, so we put a very thin layer of suede material over that. And now we go up to our oven. We've inserted that Birkenkork material in there, and what happens is already in 5 minutes you can see that hard material just became squishy. I have to be careful not to burn myself, but the stuff is just wonderful and it doesn't even smell bad as it heats and is ready to mold on top of this cast. And it's actually such that I really don't even need the gloves because it molds at such a wonderful low temperature and completely conforms to the cast that's here. I showed you that there was a button that I put on the bottom of this to build up in the sore spot this patient had in the ball of the foot. And you can see, if you look carefully here, that with this wonderfully moldable material, we can get this to mold right around that sore spot so that we can create a depression and take pressure off that spot. Now, we just insert a layer over the top of this cork so that we can get things away from it afterwards. And down goes the press. There we have it. Pull out the front part, and in moments we have the basic shell of the orthotic, which is the most important part, conforming to the foot. In a lot of cases, the solid cast that would have been created would have been modified to further correct the mechanics of the foot. But when we get to these kinds of problems, which you might classify as arthritic, but in this case involve a very, very active patient, we don't need to do all those modifications to come up with a device that will really benefit her foot and keep her pain down and the number of visits to the office down, and allow her to extend this exercise much later into life. Now when we take it off here, it's already solidified enough to remove the outer layers. And I'll just highlight for you, it's a little hard to see the depression, but we'll highlight where that button was placed and where the depression is created, matching the painful spot in the ball of this patient's foot. This by itself would not be stable enough, but by adding materials into the arch, soft materials can become fairly firm and supportive. Thinking about it much like plywood. Each layer of plywood is paper thin and by itself wouldn't support anything. But you put all those layers together and we know we get something resilient. So here we're just outlining the shell in order to take off this excess and get it down more to the shape of an insole to fit the shoe. Feather down the front so that edge is bulky. This has been applied, as I said, so I can remove it as needed to modify it and taper it into the rest of the material. This has been molded into the cup of the heel. have something that looks a little bit more like an insert in the foot. Here's initial top layer, shock absorbing middle layer, and the depression for the sore spot on this foot, so that the cup of the heel is thinner and fits in the back of the shoe. Taking it down flat for the heel, fits better in the back of the shoe. There you have it. This will be modified a little further once I fit to the patient today to reinforce the arch as needed, or to even add more material to take pressure off the sore spot in the ball of the foot.